Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Music Gallery at Home, the 420 edition. Nothing particularly invested in today's date or anything like that, but glad that you can join us again. Had such a good time last week, both in conversation and in performance, and we're getting ready to do it all again. Tonight, we have Juliet Palmer, composer extraordinaire, somebody who would be working on large-scale outdoor works. I have to confess that as I was walking around Toronto, I started thinking about Urban Vessel's work and how it can really enliven the contours of Toronto. And she'll be in conversation with Laura Stanley. And speaking about the contours of Toronto, that seems like a good time to get into the acknowledgement of the land on which the Music Gallery operates. This has been a site of human activity for 15,000 years. The land is a territory of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe Nation, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island and around the world. As part of this community and as individuals, it's up to us to recognize our privileges in this space and to educate ourselves further along the way, particularly in this time of great reorganization of things that we once considered to be normal. Maybe things can end up in a better space for us all. Yes, music gallery interviews are designed to introduce, really bridge generations. Juliet has been, I think I first met her in the mid-90s when Sarah Peebles was doing the Audible Woman broadcast on CIUT, and that was a very important media source for many composers, female composers in the 90s and the 2000s to have some of their first representation on the radio, and with such a knowledgeable host bringing it all together. In a way, I guess this will sort of recreate that vibe, because Laura Stanley is somebody who's written for music works, for Exclaim, for Now Magazine, a really well-rounded interviewer and musical connoisseur, and you worked for the Canadian Music Centre as well, I believe,
at one
point. So yes, and the Canadian Music Centre, of course, is our co-presenter in this series. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Laura's capable hands. Take it away.
Thanks, David. Hi, Juliet. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thanks, Laura.
Have you been baking bread or anything like that?
My husband's been baking bread.
I mean, that's all you need. That's all you need.
I've been planting seeds, and I sewed a quilt. You know.
Oh my God.
Things, yeah. Just
well done.
Just a few little things around the house. Yeah.
Very good. I wanted to begin our conversation at the beginning. So you are a Toronto-based composer, sound artist, performer. You were born in New Zealand. Can you tell me a bit about your initial relationship with music growing up?
Yeah, music is really in my family. So my mum plays the piano, so does my aunt. My grandmother was a singing teacher and a piano teacher. My uncle played the fiddle. My cousin played the flute. My great-grandmother used to put on these musical extravaganzas in the tiny town in New Zealand where she lived, Takaka. So yeah, so there was always this music making going on. So it was kind of inevitable that I learned to play the piano first from my mom, and then kind of went from there, learned the clarinet, and yeah, it's just part of life. Yeah.
Did you have a moment maybe when you were a bit older, when you heard a piece of music or saw somebody like play something, when you're like, I'm gonna make a go of this, I'm gonna be a musician?
Totally not.
Absolutely not.
No. I was planning to be an architect. Because I love architectural spaces and design, and yeah. So right up to the minute my last year in high school, that's what I was applying for, architecture school, and then somehow I got hijacked, probably by a very, very keen music teacher. Like, pushed me to conservatory. So I ended up going to university. I auditioned on piano and clarinet, and I chose to go and do a performance degree in clarinet. Yeah, and I was like, what the hell am I doing here? How did this happen? For many years, I thought that.
What was that experience like? Did you, I don't know, did you find your footing? Did you find out what the hell you were doing there?
Okay, so yeah, I found my footing through composing. Yeah. And so I was very fortunate actually that one of my composition teachers, I don't even think we talked about it as composition, but it was a first year course, I think, led by John Rimmer, who had been a student I later learned of Murray Schafer. So what we were doing was really listening exercises outdoors, drawing soundscapes, and making music from that. So that saved me, because it was a way to be creative with music and sound. And then I thought, oh, okay, I can last this out. And then another later, when I was still going on about architecture, another friend who was an architect sent me to look at a building site, to look at a concrete slab curing, and that cured me of my desire. It's like, okay, it's all right. I can make this work. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want anything to do with it.
Well, it's not I don't want anything, because actually a lot of my work does deal with space and movement through buildings and outdoor spaces, and I think I bring that into my music and sound practice. But I don't have to be an architect.
Yes. Well, something that I was reading that you also, part of your degree was in time-based art.
Oh yeah.
What is time-based art? Yeah, tell me.
Well, okay, so it could be performative, it could be video and film. A lot of people in that program were making sound sculptures, kinetic works, and I was in a program in music, but for my master's degree, I managed to convince the head of department that I could be let out of the Schenkerian analysis course and instead go and do work at art school in time-based art. So I worked with a wonderful musician, composer, instrument builder called Phil Dadson, who comes from the lineage of the Cornelius Cadieux Scratch Orchestra in London. He worked with him for a long time. And so Phil was a great inspiration, and I made a lot of works using video and performance and bringing those worlds together.
And then in 1990, you moved to New York.
Yeah.
I hear an echo. I hear myself speaking. It's very alarming. So yeah, you moved to New York in 1990, and you worked with Meredith Monk, a multidisciplinary artist. And I actually had never heard of Meredith Monk, but I was researching questions to ask you. And then I also, like this past week, was reading an article about her that was on Bandcamp. And then I was reading a Fiona Apple review of her new record, and the article mentions Meredith as well. So she just seems to be like all over all of a sudden, and certainly in my life. But I was wondering, what was that process like, moving to New York and working with her, and how did that relationship begin?
Yeah, so that relationship began actually through my teacher, Phil Dadson, who was at school, who was friends with some of the musicians from Steve Reich's ensemble. And when Steve was touring New Zealand, we all went out after the concert, and I ended up sitting next to Nurit Tillis, who's a wonderful pianist. She has a sort of duo called Double Edge as well as playing in this ensemble. And she also played for Meredith Monk. And she said, "What are you doing after you finish your master's degree?" And I didn't really know. So she suggested, "Why don't you apply to be an intern?" Which was a term I had never heard before. Where, like, New Zealand's a very egalitarian kind of country, or it was very much so at that time. So the idea of being someone's intern, I just didn't exist. It's a very American concept. Anyway, so I applied to do that, and then I got an Arts Council grant and went over to New York for 3 months for that internship, and basically here I am. I never left. I arrived with my backpack and my clarinet, and now I have a lot of stuff.
All this.
Yeah.
What was the biggest thing that you think that you learned from that internship?
What drew me to Meredith was because at the time I was making works, bringing together film and performance and working in sort of a spatial kind of way. And so I was really inspired by her work, which, she was a pioneer in bringing all those things together. And so what I learned from her was that every single person that's involved in complex collaboration like that is really important, whether it's the intern or the production manager or the costume designer or the person at administration or the fundraiser. But there's so many moving parts when you pull together interdisciplinary work. That's, I really learned to appreciate the kind of ballet of all those different parts coming together.
Mm-hmm. And then when did you, with your clarinet in hand, and then maybe like now a backpack full of stuff, when did you move to Toronto?
Oh, okay. Well, I did a bunch of things between them. I worked for Bang on a Can, a festival, and I went to grad school at Princeton in composition, and I had a job teaching at Brown for a year. And then by then I'd met my, at the time, boyfriend, who's a Canadian composer, James Rolfe, who I'm now married to. And so at a certain point, I finished teaching at Brown, and we thought, instead of this crazy long distance relationships, let's just try and live in one place. And so we thought, let's try and live in Toronto. And so, we drove across the border with all my belongings in a U-Haul truck. And I said, I'm here just visiting. Just
visiting.
Just visiting. There you go. And I'm still here.
A bit more into the community that you're certainly part of now. But do you have any early memories of like meeting people when you first moved here and collaborating with like other artists, or how did you
I mean, it did. I will be honest in that Toronto wasn't super friendly. Like, maybe it's a bit of a Canadian reserve. I was used to living in New York, and where people are very curious about each other. Who are you? Where have you come from? What do you do? Tell me about yourself. So that didn't necessarily happen immediately in Toronto, but I was very grateful. There were certain people that did reach out. And so some of my first work in Toronto actually was more through the dance community. Visual arts. The first thing I did was in 1998 was a sound installation at Mercer Union that visual artist or textile artist Evelyn von Mikulovsky and Reed Diamond curated a series called Spider Sense. And so I did a piece called A Guided Viewing, with these little light boxes that spoke to you they were little portraits of people. So recordings of people talking to you, kind of meditation, guiding you into a deeper relationship with them, which is quite cosmic and lovely. So that was a piece. They took a chance on me. And then Bill James, who's a choreographer, had a wonderful series called his company's called Open Spaces, and he did a great outdoor festival called Water Sources. So I was in that in 1999. There was a series, they would take the audience through the city, going from fountain to pool to fountain to the water's edge, and there would be different dance and music performances at each location. So grateful. I worked with Karen Cager on a piece there, and then I was in another piece I created with the mezzo Vilma Vitals and Martin Arnold playing hurdy-gurdy inside a sculpture down at the bottom of York Quay, I think.
Cool.
So just finding my way.
And certainly a great way to explore the city as well.
Well, I think it kind of, I'd already done outdoor pieces, looking back, like from even when I was an undergrad in New Zealand, but it gave me a sense of Toronto as certainly this emphasis on water. There's this huge, incredible lake. I'd never seen a lake that big before. Like, I'm from the ocean, a country surrounded by ocean. So that was sort of mind blowing. And then the sense of all these rivers that flow through Toronto. And so getting to know the city through these outdoor spaces was, I think, pretty inspiring.
I have a great question coming in from the people.
The people. Yay,
from the people.
Yay to the people.
Someone would like to know what you were listening to for fun during these days. Of these days, if there is time for such a frivolous question.
Oh my God. Listening to for fun. It's just weird. I'm not listening to that much music, but James and I have been singing a lot, and we have been singing these John Dowland lute songs. Like, we don't have a lute. No one can play the lute, but I wish. I was thinking maybe we could transcribe them for ukulele, but for now we're doing the piano. So I play the piano and James sings and I sing a harmony, and it's really lovely. So we do that 2 a day. We just break up our day with little John Dowland lute songs.
That sounds delightful.
That is delightful. And like, we were looking for cheerful ones the other day for, it was for my brother's birthday. And I was like, man, these are all about tears and weeping and mourning and death. And I was like, perfect. It's perfect for pandemic. Not so good for a birthday, but yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you to the question.
Yes, good question.
So back to like early days in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
I read that you had a solo piano piece that premiered at the Music Gallery in 2000. And then there was another piece with Continuing Ensemble that also premiered in 2000 at the Music Gallery. Was that do you remember those performances at the Music Gallery? Was that like your first, I don't know,
not the first time I've been at the Music Gallery. No, I've been going to a lot of things at the Music Gallery, so it was nice to feel like, okay, now people can hear what I'm up to. And I really was grateful to Eva Goyen, who commissioned that solo piano piece. And I remember visiting her in her studio in the Darling building on Spadina before it got condoized, and just trying stuff out. And that was a very personal piece. It was inspired by my grandmother, who used to play piano for silent movies in New Zealand. So it was based on all the pieces that she used to play, because she said, I would really pay attention to what was on the screen. I just play what I wanted to play. And so she's playing Chopin and Debussy and whatever. So it was really fun to work with Eve. And then Jennifer Waring from Continuum was another of those generous, open-hearted people from the new music community who said, hey, what are you up to? Write us a piece. So that was exciting. I think it was called Pale on the Ground piece for strings and flute. Yeah.
Cool. And then what was, when did Turbine Vessel start?
Yes, I think that we started actually in 2005. So my friend Christy Pearson, who's an architect and an artist and all-around wonderful, inspiring thinker, she and I got together and we curated an event called 4 Lines for the Sound Axis Festival, which was a great, exciting thing at that time, bringing together architecture and sound and music. And so 4 Lines basically mapped a path of 4 different musicians moving and playing through the downtown, and they converged on the Terence Donnelly building, which is that, what is it, molecular biology or something. It's on College, just west of University, and it's that one you can see there's like a bamboo grove inside it.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was brand new at that point. And so we were very excited to get into this space, which was designed by Architects Alliance, I think. Anyway, so those musicians, Neelan Pereira was one of them, Sarah Peebles was another, and Scott Thompson and Rob Clutton. And I still remember Rob Clutton wheeling his double bass while playing it up Beverly or up St. George Street. Yeah, so it was fun. So that was the first thing we did. Yeah, and then we pretty quickly got, hatching the idea for Slip, which happened at Harrison Baths, the public swimming pool.
Yeah, can you tell me a bit about that?
Music Gallery. Yeah, well, I mean, Christy is totally obsessed with bathing and pools and swimming. In fact, she has a new book that's just come out from MIT Press on architectural spaces and bathing. And anyway, so I also am a bit obsessed with water, so it was a good match. We explored that building through this performance piece that brought together dance and light and sound, and we had some fantastic people, but the audience was guided through into the lobby, then through the men's changing rooms, the shower room, into the big sort of space where the swimming pool is, and then out through the women's changing rooms. And there was different things happening in different rooms, but it was pretty magic. We had Yvonne Ung was the choreographer. We had some wonderful dancers, Louis Leberge-Cote, Suzanne Choi, Vilma Vittles was singing, Aki Takahashi, Japanese minyo singer, Christine Duncan, who became a longtime collaborator, she was singing in that. Jean Madin was playing Firebell. I think is that the only thing he played, possibly? Yeah, so it was a pretty fun event.
And you can
and Anna Chatterton did the words, and it was a very DIY show in that we all did everything, and we all danced and sang, and
yeah, there's a clip of it on your website that folks can watch, and it's amazing. It's super cool. But something that I'm so intrigued about contemporary music kind of in general, and certainly with your work, is how artists are kind of not being as defined nowadays with like genre or discipline. And certainly throughout your career, you have played with multiple disciplines. When you have an idea or are inspired by something, how do you decide whether to turn it into, like, I don't know, a solo work or a different type of performance? Like, how do you choose, essentially? Like,
often it's very pragmatic in that there's a container waiting for you. It's like, here, please write us an orchestra piece.
Yes.
And they go, okay, what am I obsessed about now? Okay, well, I put it in that container. But if it's a piece that I'm originating, like with my own company, or where I'm just kind of taking the lead, it's very intuitive. Like I was thinking, there was a piece I did a long time ago, 1993, called Citrus. And that was just sparked by this photo that my mum sent me of my grandparents holding this bunch of grapefruit that they'd grown in their back garden, and they looked so proud, and I really missed them. I was like, whoa, I was feeling really homesick, and I thought, well, I'm going to make a piece that just sort of honors my grandparents and tries to connect to them by literally bringing to life this photo through sound. And so that led into exploration of different texts that connect to fruit, and recording all sorts of people, and recording sounds of fruit being chopped up, and then a performative element where I was like chopping up 75 grapefruit and feeding them to the audience, and then there were slides, and so you just sort of not saying no to yourself, but just seeing how far you can take something.
Are you often inspired by just something that you see or something,
I'm inspired by the world that I live in, and I don't see my music and sound as existing separate from that. So like I have this piece that was going to be performed in March with the Hamilton Philharmonic called Firebreak. That I was writing that while all those forests were burning in Australia and in the Amazon. And I thought, I can't separate myself from the grief of that. So I'm just going to actually take this as a moment to express that and put it into the piece. And maybe that will be a place that people can just give them some space and time to process what we're going through in terms of climate crisis. And now we've got a new crisis.
Just to mix it up a bit.
Well, the other one's still there, and hopefully we're learning from the pandemic.
Well, I actually had some questions about the climate crisis, I suppose. I mean, like, you have a few pieces lately, not even lately, in the last few years that have been inspired by climate change and the climate change crisis. I'm thinking of last year you had two pieces, Oil and Water, commissioned by the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, And you wrote about it, how a piece of orchestral music could weave together places and stories relating to the struggle for clean water. And then there was Cutwork, which is commissioned by the Auckland Chamber Orchestra, also premiered last year. And you write, it takes its inspiration from textile decorations. The technique suggests musical analogies as well as a vision for ecological recovery. And then, yeah, you mentioned Firebreak, which was supposed to be premiered in March. And yeah, you mentioned like you're inspired by things around you and things that you see, but I mean, specifically, yeah, how does, I don't know, how does climate change or environmentalism or environmental activism inspire your work?
I think in a way it'd be more like, how could it not?
Yeah.
Because it's like so in my face, and it's an existential crisis facing all of us. Like, I just can't imagine it not having an impact on what I'm creating, because it's there all the time. So, and I experience it, when I go for a walk, or I, walk through the forest, and I know the plants, and I can see what's happening. I can see changes. I can see invasive species, and just if you're in tune to the environment around you, I think it's hard to separate yourself from that, because we're not separate from it. As we know now, like our food, our air, our water, it's all contingent on living in a healthy biosphere that we are part of. So, I mean, it's an awkward thing. Like, I don't want to feel like I'm doing the preachy business, but it's more just an expression of what I'm concerned about, what inspires me, what touches me, and offering that to other people. And say, okay, maybe just sit here for 10 minutes and, I don't know, be with that image of a forest burning and what that means. And also allowing yourself to feel things. Because I think so often when facing like the climate crisis, it's too painful to really let yourself feel what that means. So my thoughts especially for Firebreak, was that maybe sitting together with a bunch of people in a room, which is something that we're not doing now, but that collective listening in close proximity to other human beings could be a moment where you could really feel empathy for each other and for other species, such as trees and all the beings that live in forests.
Are you hoping that, the audiences, when they're listening to your pieces, walk away feeling a certain way, like angry, gonna, I don't know, start recycling more? I don't know.
I mean, I don't have an intention for how someone should feel. Everyone's gonna feel what they feel. Sometimes I hope when I create these outdoor pieces in Toronto, like I did a big project called Singing River in the Lower Don Valley, and that's like a very neglected kind of landscape there. It's a bit of a sad river. It's contained in a concrete channel, and I hope that by bringing moments of beauty to that space, that those moments would stay in people's memories and transform the way that they related to those environments. Hopefully with more love. Or just go, oh wow, gosh, I remember when there was 10 dancers in this field, like how incredible. And wow, there was someone in the river. Speaking of which, we've got a technological bonus here.
Well done.
We could, yeah, I totally forgot others, but there's that little clip of Birbal. So this is Juliet Palmer, who I've collaborated with a bunch of times. She's dancing in the Don River, and it looks beautiful. And then singing, it's a piece called Birbal, which is on my CD, Rivers. And Laura Stanley's the vocal soloist in that.
Rain is a flirt. When we make out, I swell so hard. When we fight, I spill my pics Mute the growls of traffic, and finally a little peace. And then you notice
Well,
me.
well done. So yeah, that was a 2015 Birbal, and you said it was off one of your records?
Yeah, I have a CD called Rivers, which came out in 2018. I worked with Jean Martin as producer on that. So it's on Barnyard Records. And it's all vocal music all the time. The only instruments are some handbells. Otherwise, just some of my most favorite singers in Toronto, Alex Samaras, Felicity Williams, Laura Swanky. Who else is on there? Tova Cardone, Mingjia Chin. Lots of great people. I could go on. But yes, yeah.
Something that I love about your work, and you know, we're talking about environmentalism, but you also have dove into so many different topics throughout your career, and I feel like I don't know, people always say write about what you know, which I'm like, no, that's boring. You got to learn about other stuff, basically, which I feel like you do. And specifically, I'm thinking of two pieces, Inside Us and the choreography of trauma. Which came out of a research residency that you did at the Sunnybrook Research Institute here in Toronto in 2018. Can you tell me a bit about what was involved with that residency?
Yes.
Yeah, how did that come about?
I can. Yes, because yes, those are areas I do not have any expertise in whatsoever. But I was very fortunate to meet actually at Continuum Concerts. One of their great supporters is Peter Burns, who's a physicist and a doctor who is a researcher at Sunnybrook. And he's like a incredible guy who figures out ways to see inside the body using microbubbles and other amazing technologies. And so Peter loves music. And so we talk about music and sound and physics. And yeah, he said, come and visit my lab. And then one thing led to the other. And I was fortunate to get an OAC Artists in the Community grant to go and spend more time meeting different scientists, checking out their work, clinicians, researchers, postgrad students, all sorts, and just see if there was any kind of artistic, scientific possibilities for collaboration. And in the end, they are all very busy saving people's lives. So it was more that I was very inspired by their work. And so two pieces came out of that residency.
Yeah, and so Inside Us, that was premiered last year, right? Or 2018?
Maybe the one before 2018.
I don't know what year.
It's Western Front in Vancouver. So they commissioned that, and it was a performance installation, and that was a very lovely process because I asked this choir, the Voiceover Mind choir, those members, just to share if they had any moments from their life where they were aware of their breath or heartbeat. And I wasn't thinking about anything particular other than that. That's what sustains us, and it's a repeating action that we do involuntarily. But what it led to was a series of really beautiful stories and memories from people, a lot coming from what we ended up calling the edges of life. So stories to do with birth or pregnancy, stories of sitting next to a loved one as they took their last breath. And just some very, very beautiful stories. And how many are there? Maybe 9. So those stories, the performers use earbuds, and they're speaking in exact sync with the recording of the edited recording of the person who's told the story. And then I create layers around that of vocal gestures, and there's some drones in it as well. Yeah.
And then the choreography of trauma that had its premiere this year, February.
Yeah. So there was a double bill with that, and then another piece by the Dutch composer Martijn Voorveldt with Continuum. And choreography of trauma really came out of an experience I had where I was allowed to be in the trauma bay at Sunnybrook for a couple of hours on a Saturday night. And I made a recording, which you don't hear, but that inspires, basically I transcribed this, like, I don't know how long it was. It felt epic because I was transcribing every single detail of this. But I was very interested in the sound world of that space. There's a lot of metal and clunks and electronic beeps and voices. And then the way that people come together to, it's very systematic, but, their overriding focus is to try and save this person's life. And so if you're in the trauma bay, you're there because if you're not there, you'd be dead. So it's very life or death. And you're lucky if you come out of there alive. And when I was there were about 12 people just working full tilt around the person who'd been shot. And the way that they coordinate information, it's a lot of listening. There's one person that's kind of the exchange for all that information synthesis, and then they're making decisions as to what happens next. So I was trying to create a parallel structure for Continuum Ensemble and Christine Duncan and the Element Choir, so that there was this kind of chaotic energy with habitual kind of patterns that they could lock into. So it was super fun to work with them, and they taught me a lot. And actually the doctors that came to the concert were very moved and really felt that it captured something of that energy of the trauma bay, which I was delighted by.
That would be a beautiful compliment. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's an amazing place to be, and I felt extremely honored to be allowed to witness that work that goes on. And right now, I'm thinking of all those healthcare workers who are just doing that day in, day out, putting themselves on the line, and with incredible skills and commitment.
Thank you to them.
Yeah, I'm grateful.
So I have a few more questions for you. Then I'll let you go back to bread eating.
I'm done with that. I'm on to clafouti now.
Well done. You've done a lot of different work across your career. You've kind of grabbed at a bunch of stuff. Is there something that you're most proud of?
Oh,
Toot your own horn.
Am I most proud of? I think I'm always thinking about the next thing. I was pleased finally to make a CD. I've never made a CD. I thought, whoa, I'm turning 50. I need to make a CD. That's what everyone else does. Should do that. So I was pleased to do that. I love it when lots of people get together. Like, I felt pretty satisfied with Singing River. Like, we had, I don't know, something like 30 different artists contributing to that. It was like a weekend long event. There were a few hundred community members took part in a whole bunch of workshops that we did. It's just like so many different angles to that project. So that was pretty mind-blowing and exhausting and very satisfying. So I was pleased that worked. And that people were excited and moved and saw this place in a new way. So.
You mentioned you're always thinking about the next thing, and the world is just like a vague black hole right now when you're looking into the future. But do you have any future projects in the works that you want to share with the people?
I have a little video clip even.
Oh my goodness.
I'm so excited. Just, making the most of this platform.
This is great.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of Every Word. The whole title is Every Word Was Once an Animal. And so that was just up and running as I contributed sound installation, and then we got shut down. It's in Oregon. So we got shut down a week after it went up. But that project is a big project with many limbs. And so what the video shows is our work in the field that we did last summer in Oregon, in these lava fields and in a reservoir and in a burnt forest. And so it was really about, inspired by different forms of nonverbal communication, sort of interspecies communication, humans, animals, how lizards communicate, how we communicate with trees. Anyway, I'm not going to say anything more. Have a look.
Cool. So that was a clip from Every Word Was Once an Animal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're just looking at it now. All the sounds on the soundtrack come from improvisations between myself and the choreographer Darian Smith in the landscape, including those sounds that sound like a crazy saxophone. It's like us bowing tree roots. So very, very satisfying process, and something we're Darian and I are looking forward to the next stage when we're going to do a more focused music, sound, and dance collaboration once we can all be in a space together. Yay. So actually, I was meant to be in Oregon now, and we were going to be doing these interventions in the gallery with audience members, building trust, touching, exchanging, gestures, and tasting and smelling things. So yeah, not really good in a pandemic.
But there'll be a time. There'll be a time.
And actually, I have super fun working on the one piece for that project, which is called Fragrance Notes. So you go up to the wall in the gallery and you sniff this amazing scent, which is fantastic, that Carla Bengtsson, the lead artist, synthesized. And it's inspired by the scent of the Western fence lizard, its scent that it uses to mark territory, which has notes of citrus, jasmine, chocolate, coffee, and resembles a bit of Sauvignon Blanc. And so we had a fabulous recording session, where we tried all those things and vocalized, and then created this amazing sound piece of voices, smelling and tasting all those wonderful things. And that was very fun.
That sounds amazing.
Yes, that was one of the more fun. Actually, everyone who came to record that day was like, I can't believe we're getting paid to like taste chocolate and vocalize.
Easiest money ever made.
Yeah, it was pretty great. Yes, so that's coming up. But among I have a couple of other projects as well. Yeah.
Do you want to? Are they a secret, or do you want to?
No, they're not a secret at all. They're very much sort of in the pipeline. But I was going to be rolling out this project called the Homing Project at the Brickworks this summer, and that was bringing together ceramics and storytelling and movement and sound with wonderful writer Phelan Johnson, who's from Six Nations, and she has a fabulous podcast on CBC called The Secret Life of Canada. If you haven't heard it, check it out. Anyway, she's working with us, and Aria Evans, choreographer, and Parker Dirks as the ceramic artist. So we're in the process of remodeling that project to kind of go online, but not too online. Like, we want it to be a thing that people can connect with, because it was very much like participatory piece. But we don't want to drag you too much into the online sphere, but more give you some ideas and then send you back out into the world and create some stuff that then we will pull together into something amazing, which speaks to the idea of home and belonging, which I think we're all thinking about that now, right now. So yeah, homing, we weren't really thinking housebound, but we can work with it.
And should folks follow you on the internet to learn more?
Yes, you can. We're on Instagram. Turbine Vessel is my company, so on Instagram and Facebook, and I mean, in theory, on Twitter, but I don't really love Twitter. So
yeah, a lot.
That's too much.
It's too much.
Yeah. So there is another project in the pipeline, but you don't need to know about that. But that's about musicians who run. So that's called Thoughts Running, which again seems very timely. It's that space you get into when you're running, the thoughts that you have, the obsessions you mull over, the landscape you're running through and how that changes. And there you go. Worrying a landscape.
I have one more question for you, and it comes from the people, but it actually is one of the questions that I had as well, which is great timing. It was prompted by an earlier observation that you had about when you first arrived to Toronto. It wasn't the most friendliest of spaces. Have you perceived a change in culture now, or in our artistic communities now? Like, are they more open?
Yeah, I think so. I would definitely say so. Like, both in terms of programming, like, I think there is a much wider range of voices that we're hearing from, people that would have been on the margins before, overlooked, and now like moving into center stage. So I think that's pretty inspiring. And then I just think there's a change in culture, so that say something like the Toronto Creative Music Lab, sadly not happening now, but I really love the ethos of just very mindful about access and making a space a welcoming space and making it possible for people to participate just from where they're at. And I want to say too, like, the Music Gallery's been doing great work in that regard, as has the Canadian Music Centre, in particular with Matthew Fava. Just really making sure that the spaces that we do have are available for people, because that is obviously something in the last 20 years, access to space has become even more challenging. And so, you know, I have some dreams about how we could do better in the city, and maybe maybe there's so many hopes about the pandemic. During this pandemic, we'll have an epiphany that finally the arts matter, or the environment matters. I mean, I do hope that some of that sort of time of reflection will pay forward in terms of larger structural changes. But I really think we need to address affordable housing, like truly affordable housing, and cultural, creative community spaces are in short supply. And that needs to be a public investment.
Absolutely.
Can't leave it even to, I mean, nonprofits in partnership with government. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what I say.
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Expropriate the land, expropriate the parking lot, and put up some really great affordable housing and some good venues and facilities. Yeah.
Yes. Let's do it.
That's
okay. Bye.
yeah.
Well, this was so lovely. Thank you for chatting.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
I'm going to throw it back over to David, who's going to sign off for us, but we'll chat again soon, I'm sure.
Yes. Somewhere.
Good luck with everything.
Not after a concert or before a concert. That is one of the sad things about
I know it is.
The situation is that, you know, going online to hear something it's fine, but so much about what we love about music and gathering together is this embodied experience of sound, but also of community, of being with people and randomly coming across folks you haven't seen in a while and catching up. Like so those little connection are very precious, and I think we're going to appreciate them that much more when we're allowed to you know, be more than 5 people together.
I'm going to give everybody a hug when I see them next. I'm giving you a hug when I see you.
Okay. Well, I hug myself, and I encourage the other person to hug themselves. And then, you know, we get that kind of imaginary sort of exchange a hug.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you, Laura and Juliet, for joining the Music Gallery at Home series tonight. And also thank you to our partners, Canadian Music Center, Matthew Fava, jumping in there, getting down and dirty with the comments, and Crystal Jacks for producing the whole thing, making the magic happen. We have 2 other events coming up this week. Wednesday, special interview with the composer of Even Blind Squirrel Finds a Nut Once in a While. Xuan will be interviewed by Matthew Fava, 7 o'clock on Wednesday. So tune in for that. And on Friday, that score will be interpreted along with other works by Naomi McCarroll Butler. And once again, that's right here on the Facebook page for the Music Gallery TO. If you want to catch up with these after the fact, you can go to the Music Gallery's channel on YouTube, and you'll be able to link that through any of the files here. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again on Wednesday. Take care.
Great. See ya.